Well, I'm going to begin with the Biden-Blinken peace deal for Gaza. In terms of Hamas's response, it's taken a little while coming. It doesn't surprise me. The reality is, with this plan, this had nothing to do with securing peace in Gaza. It had everything to do and has everything to do with the coming election in the United States, where Joe Biden, quite amazingly, I suppose, at least for me, sitting this side of the Atlantic, is trailing both in terms of the polls, but also in terms of psephologists, because it's actually not a direct election, but because it's by electors in terms of states. He's way out in front when it comes to calculation of swing states and what is needed to become president. So my own take on the so-called Biden plan is most certainly not the same as Socialist Worker. Socialist Worker wrote up this plan on the basis that Hamas fighters were doing so well militarily against the Israeli defense forces. Somehow, there you are, Biden in the White House was looking at the military picture in Gaza and goes, good God, the Israelis are losing. I better get in there with a peace plan to stop the slaughter. It's just not convincing, is it? The reality is that what we're dealing with is something that's completely the opposite. The Israeli armed forces are clearly, obviously, completely dominant. And when it comes to slaughter, it's certainly true that Israel suffered, from its point of view, a blow yesterday. What was it? 8 soldiers killed in an ambush, the biggest loss of life for them on a daily basis, I think since November. But that tells you everything. What happened just before that? The rescue operation, where Israel got back, with American help, it would seem, electronics and all the rest of it, got back its 2 captives. How many Palestinian lives did that operation cost? Let's talk of 100, 200. That's the military reality in Gaza at the present time. It's true that Hamas can hit back occasionally, but the reality is that Israel possesses overwhelming armed force. And what we've had again over the last few days is the figure being released, what the BBC will always tell you, the Hamas health authorities or something along those lines. Their latest figure is that the death toll on the Palestinian time, we're not talking about casualties, we're talking about death, has now topped 37,000. And I have to say myself that I'm quite surprised how few Palestinians have died so far, because I was certainly expecting many, many, many more deaths, not by the bullet, not by the bomb, but by disease, by people not getting adequate food, clean water, medical facilities. I expected myself the death toll to be much higher. And it's worth noting that in the south of the Gaza Strip, the Israeli army has announced a on-off. This day, we bomb you. The next day, we're going to allow free movement of, it will mainly be UN, but aid agencies delivering food and other such supplies. Either way, it's clear that vast numbers of Palestinians are on the edge of starvation and are therefore on the edge of going down, and especially with children, going down with diseases that you and me either wouldn't get, or if we did get, would simply shrug off. When you are denied food, then you become vulnerable to all sorts of, contagions that have the potential to kill not just thousands, but tens of thousands. So I'm not convinced that it's Hamas fighters. I think it's to do with the US elections. And also, just I think it's worthwhile in this context to mention the letter we've got in this week's Weekly Worker from a comrade from Brighton that is talking about the conquest of Israel by some axis of resistance, which would include Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and the Houthis. The idea that such a combination could conquer Israel under any circumstances, quite frankly, just shows a profound ignorance of geostrategic realities and any expectation of geostrategic realities. No, Iran is not just about to launch a conquest on Israel. If anything, what we actually have is the possibility. Certainly, people in Netanyahu's government, and certainly Netanyahu himself, have been gagging to be given the go-ahead by the United States to bomb the shit out of Iran, which they're quite capable of doing in a way that clearly, as was demonstrated previously with the Israeli attack on the embassy of Iran in Syria, while Iran is capable of launching missiles, how many of them would land in Israel? How many of them would hit a military or civilian target that was worthwhile from their point of view? You just ask the question, you get the answer. But no, from our point of view, we're not in favor of any conquest of Israel. What we're in favor of is a peaceful solution if we can, but our solution actually doesn't rely on reactionary powers. It relies on progressive change, crucially in Egypt, but also in other countries such as Iraq, such as Syria, and potentially Saudi Arabia. We need to sweep away these reactionary regimes, and the project has to be a working class project. And a working class project would, yes, we are convinced, at least have a chance of prizing away big chunks of the Israeli Jewish, the Hebrew population. Indeed, what we must aim for is prizing away a majority of that population from Zionism. And it's in that context that we would talk potentially about a federal solution, not within the little box of Israel, Palestine, which falls down, in our view, in the same way that any one state solution does, and that is who the hell is going to deliver it. And I've already spoken about the situation in Gaza. It's worthwhile mentioning the West Bank, where there are many reports of attacks on a daily basis by settlers. It's also worth mentioning that since October the 7th last year, something like 24,000 housing units have been built by Israel on the West Bank. We often don't take notice of what's going on the West Bank. And it isn't just about violence, it's about continued Israeli colonization. And what I want to say, just to close this particular section, is if we look at the recent resignation of Benny Gantz from the War Cabinet. Remember, there's three individuals in the War Cabinet, and then they have, how should I put it, people in the War Cabinet that play a secondary role, don't have a vote. There's been another resignation on that level. But what that's about isn't the overall project. The overall project that Zionism begins with is an Israeli colony for Israeli people. And the project is to replace all classes in Palestine with Jewish people, Hebrew speakers. Benny Gantz has no difference when it comes to that. The Labour Zionists, who began the whole thing after all, in terms of Israeli independence, have no difference on that. What he's resigning over is the short to medium term prospects in Gaza. And what he's doing is speaking for at least a fraction of the IDF high command. And what they're saying is we don't want to be an occupation force over 2 point whatever it is, 2.4, 2.5 million Palestinians. That will cost Israeli lives if we go for that. What's the point of it? That's what he's resigning over. That's what the plan argument is, and what the Israeli army wants, or should I say, at least what sections of the Israeli army wants, is to go in there, in inverted commas, do the job, and that is smash up Hamas. No one seriously thinks you can finish Hamas, but smash it up sufficiently that it thinks twice, 3 times, 4 times about doing another October the 7th, or smash it up sufficiently that it's simply not capable of doing that, then withdraw. That's what that Benny Gantz is on about. What, on the other hand, we have with Netanyahu, I think, is either in terms of his actual coalition, which we remember is different to the War Cabinet. I think what you have there is an implicit or explicit desire to actually expel the population of Gaza from Gaza, or at least the majority of the population. And the plan would seem to be clear to me. I think it's clear to them, and that is push them over the border between Gaza and the Sinai and let the Egyptians take care of them. And if they don't want to go, then let them starve. That's actually what Netanyahu and his coalition have in mind. Now, that, you know, Netanyahu ain't going to say that. The coalition partners basically do. In terms of the United States, clearly that isn't acceptable to Biden. It might not be acceptable to Biden morally, but it's certainly not acceptable to Biden electorally. On the other hand, if you look at Trump, that's another question entirely. And I think with Trump, potentially at least, I mean, I don't know. Certainly, I think that's what Netanyahu thinks. Trump will say, go the whole way, get rid of these people, solve the problem once and for all. And while you're at it, do the West Bank as well. What then happens to the Abraham Accords with Saudi Arabia and all the rest of it, I haven't got a clue. But that, I think, is what Netanyahu is banking on. In other words, from Netanyahu, he was never going to accept the Biden plan. He wants this war to at least go on until November, perhaps to January. And if we look at his own particular individual position, he's clearly got a self-interest in keeping this war going on permanently. Why not? There are loads of permanent wars. And, you know, in terms of Netanyahu, that also has with it the bonus, surely, of leading to some kind of greater Israel. But again, just to stress the point, a greater Israel isn't just the plan of Likud, isn't just the plan of the far right in the coalition government. It's in the nature of Zionism itself. And the fundamental problem that Zionism has is simply, if we look at the number of Jews around the world, roughly speaking, we have the same number of Jews in the United States as we do in Israel. And for good reasons, the majority of Jews in the United States had no intention whatsoever of packing up their bags and leaving the United States to take their chances in Israel. And that's true for the majority of Jews elsewhere in the world. So unlike the United States, unlike Australia, there is no endless stream of migrants willing to come. Israel simply hasn't got enough Jews in the world that want to come to Israel to flood the native population. So instead, it has to get rid of them either physically by letting them die or pushing them beyond the borders, as it did, for example, in 1948. Okay.